Okay, it's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back to another episode of Felonious.
Yeah, welcome back. I'm Nazia.
And I'm Emma. And today's episode is about Rose Dugdale, an Oxford graduate who was born into wealth. And instead of embracing her family's lifestyle, she rebelled against it and chose to fight for one of the most controversial causes in the 20th century, the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA. Rose was involved with organising one of Ireland's biggest art heists and was involved with stealing a helicopter to bomb a constabulary. Rose supported a faction of the Irish Republican Army called the Provisionals or Provos. While both the IRA and Provisionals wanted a united socialist Irish Republic, the Provisionals believed that violence and terrorism were necessary to rid Ireland of the British, whereas the IRA preferred parliamentary tactics after 1972.
And we've briefly touched on the IRA in our previous episode, the Puppet Master one, haven't we?
Yeah.
Although we don't really go into much detail about it.
No, but I think I do in this episode, don't I?
Yeah.
Let's hope so. So in this episode, there will be mentions of violence, terrorism and theft. And the research for this episode came from a number of sources, a couple of books. One was The Woman Who Stole Vermeer by Anthony Amor. The other one was Heiress, Vigilante, Bomber, The Extraordinary Life of Rose Dugdale by Sean O'Driscoll. And there is a programme called The Heiress and the Heist, which was on RTE1 Ireland. And that was in 2023.
So quite recent.
Yeah, very recent.
Yeah. Rose Dugdale was born in 1941 during the Blitz. She grew up in the countryside on a 600-acre property in Devon and was safe from the horrors of war happening in London. Her father, Lieutenant Colonel Eric Dugdale, served in North Africa on a campaign to drive the Nazis out of the country, but he was injured and then discharged. Rose's mother, Carol Dugdale, kept a gun underneath her bed while her husband was away so as to fight the Germans off if they invaded. She also had 2 children from a previous marriage who were raised by Eric as his own. Carol suffered from postpartum depression after Rose was born. Her half-brothers took care of her by changing her nappies and taking her for walks in the park. Her father worked at Lloyd's of London as an underwriter and was very wealthy. Her mother, Carolyn, was very strict with Rose and her sister. They were not allowed to decorate the Christmas tree until they were 10. They had a very formal upbringing. They even had to wear formal dresses with long gloves and curtsy to guests that would come for dinner. At 17, when they had left school, they were expected to behave like women. Not being able to decorate a Christmas tree until you're 10.
I know, could you imagine? That's like torture.
I didn't decorate a Christmas tree until I was in my late 20s, but...
Okay, yeah, you had it worse, I suppose.
No. I mean, I grew up in a Muslim household, but given that, they were in a Christian... I don't know, it seems quite strict. And, that's when all the magic is, before you're 10, when you're more naive and...
Yeah, and having to dress up just because people were coming around for dinner and you have to curtsy to
guests.
People.
Yeah, it's very, very formal.
Very upper class.
Yes. In 1958, Rose and her sister were debutantes and had a coming out ceremony to the Queen at Buckingham. That's so Bridgerton, isn't it? Sorry. I'm sure it wasn't quite as nice as Bridgerton, but yeah.
Yeah, Bridgerton or Jane Austen.
Yeah. They went to a number of balls where Rose's parents were looking for a husband for her. Rose only agreed to be a debutante if her father allowed her to apply for Oxford University. He agreed and she got in. There were only 5 colleges that accepted women at Oxford compared to the 30 that accepted men. A number of students had their lives planned out for them by their parents and so would often act rebellious. These were the people Rose hung out with. In 1959, Rose and her friend Jenny Grove wanted to join in on the debates at the Oxford Union Society. Women were allowed in, but they had to sit in the gallery and they could not take part. Jenny came up with the idea of dressing up as men, and Rose liked the idea. They were able to get into the debate and were captured by journalists who were up in the gallery, who were invited by Jenny. The pictures appeared in the newspapers the next day. This proved a point that women could take part, and in 1962, the rules were changed and women were given the right to take part in debates. Rose studied politics, philosophy, and economics at university, and many professors remember her as a hard worker. The 1960s was a period of struggle for racial equality in the US, and Rose wanted to be a part of the revolution to change things for groups of people who had been marginalised. There is a picture of Rose in a room with Martin Luther King Jr. She also went to Cuba when Fidel Castro won the revolution there. In 1968, Rose was accepted to a doctorate in economics at Bedford College in London, where she read Marxist and anarchist literature. In 1970, Rose visited Manchester University, where there were student occupations that she wanted to take part in. While in Manchester, she met a group of radical Irish students, and she learned about the troubles happening in Northern Ireland. The Catholic nationalist population were rebelling against the state. She went to Belfast and witnessed the British Army trying to hold on to British rule. I wonder if her mother resented her father agreeing to her going to university.
Yeah, but he must have thought, Oxford aren't going to let a woman in.
Yeah, or like she's only going to get so far.
Yeah.
You know, once she's married, that's fine, you know, like...
But they were so young when they had to be, like, the debutantes and, like, parade around to get a husband.
I know. And, like, how much older would those husbands have been?
Yeah, they wouldn't have been the same age as...
No, exactly.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
In August 1971, internment was introduced in Northern Ireland by Unionist Prime Minister Brian Faulkner in the hopes of stopping political violence. The British Army broke into nationalists and Republicans' homes and took them to prison without trial or due process. This created great anger in the nationalist community and caused more violence between Catholics and Protestants. There were many marches to protest against internment. Bloody Sunday happened on the 30th of January 1972 in Derry. It was a civil rights march where 26 unarmed people were shot by the British soldiers. 13 people died. The IRA used this event as a recruitment tool. Rose was heavily influenced by the events that were taking place in Northern Ireland at the time. She wanted to be a part of challenging the British establishment and its role in the injustice that people in Northern Ireland were facing. In London in 1971, Rose set up a claimants union where people could go if they were having trouble with their benefits, if they had been refused housing by the government, and helped to pay their bills. Rose's friend Jenny Grove was temporarily homeless at this time, and Rose helped her and her son. Rose wasn't the best judge of character in most cases, and surrounded herself with people who constantly asked for money, and she obliged. She had received a lot of money from her parents, and she had shares in her father's company. She started to date Walter Heaton, who was a union activist and had a criminal record, and he was married with children. Walter took advantage of Rose in order to gain the rich lifestyle. He would drive around in fancy cars and wore expensive suits. They both became concerned about Irish independence and started to learn Gaelic. Rose would drive around in her open-top car in London, playing loud IRA music. This was at a time when the IRA were bombing several locations. In 1972, both Rose and Walter went to Belfast and Derry, where they witnessed the immense destruction of homes and roads, and burning tyres were flung at the police. Walter later said that he remembered the Derry nationalists digging a hole in the ground, and they put a bus in it, surrounded it with concrete so that half of the bus was in the hole and half above, in order to block the army. Both Rose and Walter met with IRA leaders in Derry and offered both weapons and money to help aid their cause. There's a picture of this bus.
Is there?
Yeah, it looks insane. It's like this massive hole with a bus just sticking up.
I was wondering, I mean, I should have looked into this before, but is it still there or did they get rid of it?
I think they must have got rid of it.
That would have been quite a cool monument.
Yeah, it would have been. I imagine it would have stopped traffic, though.
Yeah, I guess it was a bit of an inconvenience. But
yeah. The same year, Rose took out money from a trust fund and bought a flat in Tottenham, London. But after seeing a homeless couple in a cemetery, she invited them to stay in her flat and eventually signed it over to the couple. Rose introduced her family to Walter, who disliked the formality in the household and refused to eat anything unless the servants ate with them. He went to Rose's father's office once and accused him and his colleagues of stealing from the poor. Despite this, Walter urged Rose to open a bank account in Walter's wife's name with a deposit of £25,000, but withdrawals had to be countersigned by Walter. Walter also bought a Mercedes with money Rose had given to him, so he berated people who had money and who were higher up in society, but gladly took money from the rich to spend it on himself.
Do we know if his wife knew about this affair? Because how would he have explained that money and the car?
I have a feeling, I think I read in one of the books that she did know about it.
Okay. I mean, I guess if it was bringing in money.
I think that's exactly why she went along with it.
Yeah.
I think I remembered that right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't believe me, go and check out the books and read it for yourself.
Yeah. And try to have better memory than us.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I guess, why not?
But the impression I get of Rose, like she's
quite naive.
Well, yeah, she's wanting to do all these good and nice things for people, like homeless people and just people who are in trouble financially. And she thinks that she's doing a good thing by like helping the IRA. But
well, I don't want to misspeak because I don't know enough about the IRA, but I feel like it can be argued that they are a resistance movement.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we were growing up, we were told that they were terrorists because they were, attacking London, but we never get told the real story. And yeah, I feel like it sounds like she was a bit naive at this point.
At this point, yeah.
And she had good intentions, obviously.
Part of it is rebelling against her parents still.
Yeah, it's that as well, isn't it? It's
rebelling against that lifestyle.
Exactly. And like they were trying to oppress her while she was still a teenager. And that's probably the worst time to try and oppress anyone because teenagers are the most rebellious things. And that started off her trajectory. Like she's done a lot of good things with it, but at the same time, there's a lot of naivety in. And I guess, that's what happens when she was raised in quite an upper class, formal setting. She doesn't really have a real grasp on what it's like to be on the other side. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm too tired to put it through eloquently, but
we get the gist.
Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, she's by even up to this point, she's achieved quite great things. With the whole Oxford thing, letting women debate.
Yeah.
And like meeting incredible figures like Fidel Castro and Martin Luther King. That's quite an impressive thing, especially for a woman at that time.
Yeah, at that time.
Yeah.
But it slightly starts to go downhill from here.
Yeah.
Because in 1973, both Rose and Walter ran out of money, but she knew where she could get more. Her father had cut her off, and so she decided to go to the Dugdale farmhouse when the family went there. She had grown up in the house and spent summers there with her parents, so she naturally knew what was inside. She was accompanied by Walter and one of his criminal cousins, and they stole paintings, silver and antiques that they could sell on. The total value was around £80,000, which was a lot of money back in 1973. However, the method and motive they used pointed to Rose. The house staff didn't hear the dogs bark because they knew Rose. The only room that wasn't touched was Rose's old bedroom, and there was an expensive item left that Rose had given to her mother. Walter and Rose were arrested and put on trial. Walter said that their arrest was the greatest injustice since Christ.
Okay, Walter.
Rose said during the trial that she loved her father, but that she despised everything he represented, the capitalist society, wealth, and the elite. Walter got 6 years and Rose got a suspended sentence on the judgment that she was unlikely to reoffend. Rose was then determined to prove that wrong. She supported Walter while he was in prison and protested outside the jail about his arrest.
Up until Christmas 1973, Rose made weekly prison visits to see Walter. Then she just disappeared without telling Walter where she was going. A few months later, she emerged in Northern Ireland and was in a relationship with an IRA soldier called Eddie Gallagher. Eddie rebelled against the strict leadership structure and decision-making within the IRA by committing his own activities. In October 1973, there were reports of prisoner escapes at Mountjoy Prison in Dublin. Seamus Twomey, J.B. O'Hagan and Kevin Mallon were all senior members of the Provisional IRA, and the organisation wanted them out of prison. So the PIRA, which is a Provisional IRA, volunteers hijacked a helicopter, which they landed in the exercise yard of the prison and picked up the prisoners. On the 9th of January 1974, Rose and Eddie were staying in a hotel in Donegal on the border of Northern Ireland. There happened to be a helicopter pilot, Captain John Hobday, who was staying at the same hotel. He worked for a helicopter company that ran services for people in lighthouses in the Republican Northern Ireland. Rose befriended the captain, introduced herself as Stephanie Grant, and persuaded him that she was working for a French magazine and that she needed to do a site recce for her article. So she persuaded him to take her and her photographer Eddie up in his helicopter the next day. While in the air, Eddie pulled out a gun, threatened Hobday, and got him to land in a field where Provisional IRA operatives were waiting with explosive encased in 4 10-gallon milk churns. The idea was that the helicopter would transport them to the Royal Ulster Constabulary Station in Strabane, where they planned to drop the explosives. Captain Hobday helped Rose and Eddie remove the helicopter's back seats and cargo compartments, but the helicopter couldn't handle the weight of the steel milk churns, so 2 were discarded in water before they even got to their intended location. Another churn was chucked way off target, and the other one was close to the target but didn't detonate. This sounds like shambles.
Just a comedy of errors.
Yeah, exactly. Rose described this as one of the happiest days of her life and pushed aside the fact that if the explosives were successful, it would have been mass murder. Fingerprints were taken from the milk churns and they pointed to Rose. Wanted posters were made to catch Rose. The IRA were concerned about the attention this attracted, as they usually conducted their activities without high publicity.
When Walter Heaton first heard about the helicopter bombing plot, he thought it was an elaborate way to put pressure on the prison authorities to improve conditions for Walter. But when he...
Sorry.
He set up himself.
I know, right?
But when he found out about Rose's true intentions, he said, "I felt let down by Rose because she played right into the hands of the police by those bombings and made it worse for me inside prison because they held me guilty by association with her activities, so that I must have been some kind of terrorist supporter." He obviously thought that Rose was still supporting him and protesting outside prison and whatnot.
What a narcissist.
But she was off with this Eddie Gallagher plotting to bomb a constabulary.
Yeah.
But he had no idea. I just find it really funny.
What an absolute narcissist. And also, that must have been some kind of terrorist supporter. What were you supporting when you were... what did you think you were doing beforehand? It just shows he was just doing it for the money and, putting on this facade. Absolute narcissist.
On the 23rd of February 1974, at Kenwood House in England, a Vermeer painting was stolen through a broken window. The owners received a demand from the people who stole it, and they wanted the Price sisters, Marianne and Dolores, to be freed from Brixton Prison and sent to Northern Ireland. The Price sisters were Republicans. Their father was an IRA activist in the 30s and 40s. The sisters took part in bombings in London where 250 people were injured. They were later arrested and sent to prison where they went on hunger strike for over 200 days. The British government implemented force feeding the sisters, which is dangerous due to choking hazards and infections. Miriam Price described the process years later, and she said, 4 male prison officers tie you into the chair so tightly you can't struggle. They push a metal spring device around your jaw to prise it open, force a wooden clamp with a hole in the middle into your mouth. Then they insert a big rubber tube down that and hold your head back. They take jugs of this gruel and pour it into a funnel attached to a tube. The force feeding takes 15 minutes, but it feels like forever. You're terrified the food will go down the wrong way, and you won't be able to let them know because you can't speak or move. You're frightened you'll choke to death. The force feeding continued for 167 days, and prison documents showed that the sisters suffered with mouth abrasions, tooth damage, and fainting attacks because of the force feeding process and the vomiting that it often caused.
It makes you wonder, had one of them died as a consequence of choking, like if it got to that point, like what would the police have said for themselves, or would they have just covered it up?
I don't think they would have cared.
Yeah,
because they were so against.
They just saw them as such villains.
Yeah,
and they're treating them like worse than animals. You know, it's crazy.
And in one of the books, I learned a fact about Dolores Price. Because she represented patriotism and the want to unify Ireland, she became so famous that there were rumours of her standing as a candidate for Parliament from prison.
Okay.
And by law, prisoners couldn't vote, but they still had a right to appear on a ballot. Okay. I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that is law at the moment.
Yeah. Never heard of that either.
No, I hadn't either.
Well, the only time I've heard of, it's not exactly the same, but there's a lady in India, I've forgotten her name. I've got the book, but she was a vigilante, and she became known as the Bandit Queen of India. There's a autobiography or biography about her, incredible story, but she then became a member of Parliament in India. This was a while ago. I'm trying to remember the name. Poolan Devi. She had an awful life, and then, she ended up becoming a member of Parliament in India. So, sorry, that one, the Dolores Price just reminded me of that a little bit.
The people holding the painting to ransom set a strip of the canvas to Kenwood House, and they concluded it was the painting that had been stolen. The IRA said it was not involved, and the sister's father also criticised the act. The police had no idea who the burglars were, and apparently even enlisted a psychic who said she knew where the painting was. She led police to the frame of the painting, but the painting was not present. Rose and Eddie were inspired by this theft, and it led to Eddie visiting the National Gallery in Ireland to research where paintings by the old masters might be found. He discovered that the largest collection was held by Sir Alfred and Lady Bite at Rusborough House in Ireland. Sir Alfred Bite was an MP, and so was a part of the British establishment that Rose and Eddie were so against. It wasn't a secret that the Bites had an enormous art collection. Whenever they went on holiday, they got the National Gallery to look after their paintings, so they weren't vulnerable to burglary. Rose and Eddie planned to steal the paintings held at Rusborough House to free the Price sisters from prison. And so on the 26th of April, 1974, Rose and 3 accomplices went to the house. The house had no security outside. There were no guards. The phone lines were cut, and they knocked on the side door used by the house staff. One of the footmen answered the door along with the 14-year-old son of the butler. Rose put on a French accent and told a story that her car had just broken down and that she needed help. The footman put his head round the corner of the door to see where the car was when Rose's accomplices rushed him and got inside the house. They hit the footman in the head with a rifle and then demanded to see the Bites. The Bites were in the library surrounded by the art collection. Rose and her accomplices rushed in and hit both the Bites on the head with their guns. They tied up all of the staff and the Bites and dragged Lady Bite to the cellar. They ripped out the panic alarm that was linked to the local Garda station and looked to see if there were other security systems set up. Rose went around the house and identified to the others which paintings she wanted them to steal. There were 19 by different artists such as Vermeer and Gainsborough. They ripped the paintings out of the frames, put them in the car and drove off. It was the biggest art heist at the time, amounting to nearly $150 million in today's money. After the robbery, one of the house staff freed themselves and then helped the bites. Because the phone lines were cut, someone had to go to the police to notify them, and so it gave Rose and her team enough time to get away. Rose also took Sir Alfred's diary, used later to write a ransom note which authenticated that the note was from the same people who stole the paintings. There were two demands: the release of the Price sisters from prison and the payment of £500,000. The Bites refused to pay the ransom. The insurance companies placed a reward up for the paintings, which could only be claimed if the paintings were undamaged, and that it would lead to an arrest. Rose and Eddie hoped that Bite would use his influence in the British government to move the Price sisters to Northern Ireland. The police put checkpoints up around Ireland in the hope of finding the paintings. They even searched in vacant properties and farmhouses. Rose and Eddie went to West Cork, in the south of Ireland, after the robbery. It is a remote location and a tight-knit community, so strangers would stick out. The car they used to move the paintings broke down before they got there, and they had to get a mechanic to look at it. They ended up dumping the getaway car in a rural area where they thought it would go unnoticed, but a farmer spotted the car and called the police. Traces of gold paint from the picture frames and a provisional driving licence belonging to Vanessa Kenny were found in the car. The registration documents of the car were tracked down, and the dating format was unusual. The day, month and year were separated by a colon. The original application for the driving licence was tracked down, and the police found Rose's fingerprints on it. The heist garnered high attention from the media and was a major story around the world. The Irish Times declared it the largest heist on record. And the IRA considered Eddie Gallagher at this point to be a maverick. They also said that it would not have rented a cottage in an area where strangers would be easily recognised, and they would have taken one of the Bites hostage and gone underground. The IRA were in fact embarrassed by the robbery and said people like Dugdale, who are in revolt against their upbringing and perhaps feel a bit guilty about their comfortable situation in life, should stay out of our business and leave the fighting to the people who know what they are doing. Senior officers in the Provisional Army were angered about how the news of the robbery overtook that of the hunger strikes that were taking place.
It all sounds a bit shambolic. Do you know what it reminds me of? And this is probably an awful, awful comparison. Do you remember Four Lions?
Yes.
It's like the Irish version of that.
Yeah.
She's got no business.
Stay out of her business and leave the fighting to the people who know what they're doing.
Her and her boyfriends have no business getting into political matters and trying to represent a resistance, in this case the IRA, which is a resistance movement, and just, putting an embarrassing spotlight on their mission.
And it is taken away from what's actually happening in the prisons and...
yeah.
Like the horror of the, force feeding of the prisoners.
And like the Price sisters, they're trying to send them their own message with their hunger strike, and now it's being overshadowed by this ridiculous heist.
Mm.
That was, from the sounds of it, quite easily solved.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out in the next episode if it's solved or not.
Oh yeah, that's true. They haven't found them yet.
No, because next week we find out whether Rose and Eddie get caught, where their relationship ends up, and why a guy from Malaysia offered Rose his hand in marriage.
I mean, all of this just to avoid getting married at the age of 17.
There are easier ways, people.
Yeah. But I mean, up to this point, what a life she's led, and what a trail of chaos she's left in her path.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to come.
Yeah. It was a nice, short and sweet episode.
Yeah.
But lots has happened, so...
Yeah, and part 2 will be out next week, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, so we'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, see you next Tuesday for part 2. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more information about the show on our website at feloniouspod.com or on our Instagram at felonious.pod.
Links to our show notes can be found in the episode description, as well as through our website and social media. You can visit our Contact Us page and tell us what you think about the show and if there are any cases you would like us to cover. We hope you join us for the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye!